Most fantasy worlds fail before the story even begins. Readers might not realize it at first, but something just doesn't cut it. The setting is detailed, the magic is interesting, yet the world itself? Thin, unconvincing, forgettable. That's because world building isn't just about filling notebooks with lore, it's about crafting a world that demands to be believed. And when writers get it wrong, the entire story suffers. After 25 years of writing fantasy and working closely with writers at many levels, I've seen the same 7 world-building mistakes quietly sabotage promising stories again and again. And the first of these mistakes is the reason magic often feels empty instead of immersive. Imagine picking up a fantasy novel, and the first thing you learn is that this world has magic. Sounds exciting, right? But then, as you read further, you notice something strange. People still farm their fields with oxen. Messages are still delivered by horseback. Kings still rule from stone castles exactly like medieval Europe. It's as if someone invented electricity, but society never changed. People are still relying on candlelight for everything. That's when the illusion shatters. Because if magic exists, it has to change the world. Yet so many fantasy writers treat magic like an isolated feature, a cool power system that characters use in combat, while the rest of the world remains completely untouched by it. That's not how real world-changing forces work though. They shape everything. Think about electricity, for example, here again. It's easy to take for granted, but electricity doesn't just exist, it has completely transformed our world. It dictates when we wake up, how we communicate, what we build, even the metaphors we use. Have I heard someone say, "I need to recharge," or "that sparked an idea"? Those phrases only make sense in a world shaped by electricity. Now let's apply that thinking to a fantasy setting. What if your world has magic that allows people to share memories through touch? In a society where knowledge can be transferred instantly, traditional education might look entirely different. Schools may not rely on books at all, and oral storytelling could become the dominant form of historical record keeping. But that also raises a problem. What happens when memories fade or worse, are altered? Does history become unreliable as different people pass down slightly different versions of the same event? And what about privacy here? If memory sharing is common, do people develop strict social taboos around casual contact? Or is there a legal system in place to prevent people from stealing or manipulating memories? Governments might regulate this magical ability as tightly as we regulate weapons, or entire religious movements could emerge based on the idea of purifying or protecting one's thoughts. These ripple effects are what separate a living world from a generic setting. When magic transforms not just individuals but entire societies, it stops feeling like a game mechanic and starts feeling real. But even if your world's magic is well integrated, there's still another mistake that can break immersion. One that makes entire cultures feel flat and artificial. I'm sure you've seen it before. The mountain people are all proud warriors. The forest dwellers live in perfect harmony with nature. The desert nomads value nothing but freedom. It feels right at first, after all, real-world cultures have defining traits. But then you step back and realize these aren't cultures at all, they are caricatures. A society built around a single defining value might seem like strong world building, but in reality it's too simple to be real. It ignores the tensions, contradictions, and internal conflicts that make cultures feel alive. Look around in the world and you'll find competing ideals that shape its identity. Japan, for example, is famous for rigid social conformity, yet it also celebrates individual mastery and personal craftsmanship in fields like art, martial arts, and cuisine. Meanwhile, America prides itself on rugged individualism, yet at the same time its economy and culture thrive on team-based cooperation from sports and corporate structures to the military. These contradictions aren't mistakes, they're what makes societies complex, dynamic, and real. Now think about your own world. Does every citizen of your kingdom blindly follow the same values? Or do different regions, social classes, or generations interpret them in different ways? I've said it before, a world where every culture follows a single guiding principle feels flat and artificial. But a world where cultures have internal debates, contradictions, and diversity of thought, that one feels authentic. And the fix in my experience isn't to abandon cultural identity, it's to layer it. Maybe a warrior society isn't just about strength, but about strength versus wisdom, where some believe battle should be a last resort while others see it as the truest test of worth. Or a deeply religious empire isn't uniform in belief, but split between those who embrace old traditions and those who push for reform. Even within a single culture, people disagree, adapt, and evolve. A world that recognizes that will always feel more alive than one where every culture is just a stereotype. At least if you ask me. But great world building isn't just about avoiding mistakes, it's about having a clear process. That's why I created a step-by-step framework to help you build immersive worlds, outline your plot, and finish your novel. Check out the link in the description below and grab your free starter kit right away. Moving on, even if your cultures have depth, they can still feel disconnected, especially if your magic system doesn't evolve alongside them. Cultures aren't shaped by their own internal values and traditions. They are also a product of external influences, historical change, and environmental necessity. Yet in fantasy, there's one world-building mistake that keeps resurfacing. Everything looks like medieval Europe. Kingdoms with towering castles, knights in shining armor, taverns full of ale and roasted meat. It's all familiar, too familiar sometimes. While medieval-inspired settings aren't inherently bad, they often come across as default choices rather than intentional decisions. That's when the cracks begin to show. If your world has magic, why hasn't warfare evolved beyond swords and bows? If your continent has vast, sprawling trade networks, why do your societies still resemble isolated, self-sufficient villages? History tells us that civilizations are shaped by far more than just their local environments. They are influenced by trade, conquest, migration, technological advancements, and cross-cultural exchanges. Consider how much medieval Europe itself was shaped by outside influences. Paper and gunpowder? Brought over from China via the Silk Road. Arabic numerals? You can thank the Islamic world for those. The spice trade? A driving force behind the economic rise of kingdoms. In fantasy, though, we often see static medieval settings, frozen in time and untouched by external ideas. These worlds aren't just repetitive, they are missing out on opportunities for depth and uniqueness. So how do you break free from this pattern? Personally, I'd start by questioning your defaults. Instead of automatically setting your world in a pseudo-European feudal system, ask, what if my civilization had a different foundation? What if it was structured around merchant republics like Renaissance Venice or the trading empires of West Africa? And beyond politics, what about architecture, cuisine, philosophy, and daily life? If your world has dense jungles instead of open plains, does architecture develop around canopy bridges and stilted homes rather than stone castles? By looking beyond medieval Europe as a default, you create a world that feels less like a copy of the settings we've seen before and more like a place that could actually exist on its own terms. If medieval Europe is the right inspiration for your story, then absolutely go for it. Just make sure it's a conscious decision. But even if your setting properly uses or moves beyond the medieval template, there's still another problem that can keep your world from feeling alive. One that stops civilizations from ever truly changing. Fantasy worlds are often filled with ancient kingdoms that have remained unchanged for centuries. Empires rise and fall, wars are fought, trade routes expand, yet somehow traditions, languages, and beliefs remain exactly the same. But that's never how history works. Cultures don't just exist, they evolve. No civilization develops in a vacuum. Every nation, tribe, and empire is shaped by trade, war, migration, conquest, and cultural blending, whether by choice or by force. The food we eat, the languages we speak, the clothes we wear, all of these things are the result of centuries of exchange and adaptation. Take something as commonly used as the English language. It's a chaotic mix of Anglo-Saxon, Latin, Norse, and French influences. Why? Because England was repeatedly invaded and ruled by different peoples, each leaving a linguistic fingerprint. Cultures in a fantasy world, in my opinion, should function the same way. People don't just live inside neat, isolated bubbles. They borrow, adapt, and reshape ideas constantly. Look at just the past 100 years. Think about how much daily life has changed. The way we communicate, the way we travel, the jobs we have, even the way we think about war, health, and human rights have all shifted dramatically. But let's go back to your world. Has technology progressed? Have cities expanded, crumbled, or been rebuilt? Do old traditions still hold the same meaning, or have new generations reshaped them? It doesn't always have to be dramatic if you ask me. Sometimes change is subtle. A noble family that has lost its influence but still clings to old traditions. An ancient fortress now used as a trade hub. Or a sacred festival that once was about honoring the gods but has evolved into a commercial holiday. If your world has had centuries of history, then where are the visible marks of time? But even if your world allows for change over time, there's yet another problem that's just waiting to strike you down. Now, if you ask me, too many fantasy worlds treat geography as little more than a backdrop. A collection of mountains, rivers, and forests that exist to look pretty on a map rather than shaping civilizations in meaningful ways. But geography, if looked at carefully, actually dictates everything. Where cities are built, what people eat, how nations expand, the wars they fight, all of it is shaped by the land beneath their feet. The civilizations of Mesopotamia flourished between two great rivers, allowing for agricultural advancements that wouldn't have been possible in harsher environments. The Sahara created natural barriers that limited direct conquest but didn't stop trade, leading to the rise of powerful merchant kingdoms. Imagine waking up tomorrow in a completely different climate. If you've lived your entire life in a mild, rainy region, suddenly finding yourself in an arid desert wouldn't just be an inconvenience. It would change everything about how you move, what you wear, how you get food, and even how you think about time. Now apply that to the people in your fantasy world. Too often, fantasy worlds ignore this kind of deep practical adaptation, treating geography like an aesthetic choice rather than a force that actually shapes how people live. But even if geography is deeply woven into your world, there's still one last mistake that can quietly break immersion. One that happens when the economy simply doesn't make sense. A kingdom locked in endless war, yet somehow its economy never collapses. A remote village with a thriving blacksmith despite having no mines, no trade, and no customers beyond a handful of farmers. If you've ever paused while reading a fantasy novel and thought, wait, how does this place actually function? Then you've encountered the problem of inconsistent or illogical economics. Too many fantasy worlds fail to consider how trade, resources, and wealth actually work, in my opinion. And when that happens, the world stops feeling believable, not because it lacks magic or fantastical creatures, but because it ignores the fundamental logic of survival. If you look around in the world, you see that wealth, resources, and trade define power. Empires rise because they control critical goods. Like Rome thrived on grain imports, Venice became powerful through trade, and the Industrial Revolution was fueled by coal and steel. The question here is if your world follows similar patterns. If a nation relies on magic, for example, does it make certain materials obsolete? Or if teleportation exists, does trade evolve differently? Every society, no matter how advanced or magical, runs on a network of labor, resources, and distribution. When those systems are missing, the world doesn't feel immersive, it feels manufactured. An economy isn't just about coins and markets. It dictates who holds power, who struggles to survive, and what people value most. And that can change in your fantasy world. A world where wealth is tied to land ownership will develop differently from one where magical energy is the most prized commodity. You see, if certain professions wield enormous influence, whether that's merchants, mages, or artificers, entire political and social structures will form around them. And just think about what happens when that balance shifts. When a kingdom loses control of a critical resource, when a long-standing labor system collapses. The entire society has to adapt or break under that pressure. Fantasy worlds, though, often focus on who rules, but true power belongs to those who control what people need. That's when I build worlds, I always start with resources. What drives wealth? Is it land, trade, or something more unusual, like magical energy, rare herbs, or enchanted metals? Whatever holds value, someone controls it. And when one group has power over a resource that others rely on, conflict is inevitable. Whether it's a ruling class hoarding resources, an underground smuggling network, or entire regions built on exploitation, money and magic both shape who holds influence and who is forced to fight for scraps. When the economy collapses, so does everything else. If you want to create immersive, believable worlds without getting stuck in endless world building, then watch this video here next where I break down the exact framework that saved me months of writing time while making my worlds and stories stronger than ever.